Hello and welcome. In an era of shifting global dynamics, the relationship between India and Australia is taking center stage. This is a relationship that goes beyond trade agreements, strategic collaborations, and geopolitical alliances. The true potential of these growing ties between the two countries lies in building enduring knowledge ecosystems that can drive progress, foster innovation, and shape the next generation of leaders. Driven by shared democratic values, complementary strengths, and an aligned vision for inclusive growth, both countries stand at a pivotal inflection point to co-create scalable, impactful solutions for a dynamic global future. The foundation for this rapidly evolving India-Australia knowledge corridor was laid back in 1994 when Deakin University became the first foreign university to establish operations in India. And 3 decades later, it has become the first international university to open a teaching campus in India. Today, we talk about the future of bilateral collaboration in education, innovation, and global leadership with our guests in studio. We have with us Professor Ian Martin, Vice Chancellor, Deakin University, Dr. Monica Kennedy, Head of Austrade South Asia, and Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, former diplomat and author of India-Australia Economic Strategy, Vice President, India-Australia Chamber of Commerce. Thank you all so much for joining us. It's really a pleasure to have you with us on NDTV. To begin with, Professor Wadhwa, I would like to start with you. What is the strategic importance of India-Australia relationships? And if you can also tell us and our viewers, what is the scope?
The relationship, one of the fastest growing relationships we had with any other country. And in 2020, India and Australia had signed a comprehensive partnership. And since then, we've seen ties between India and Australia grow in multifaceted ways. Most important of them, of course, is the fact that we now have a shared vision of the region and the Indo-Pacific in particular, where we have full confidence in each other, working with each other in terms of making sure that the Indo-Pacific remains a secure, safe, and prosperous area. And for that to happen, India and Australia must come together in multifaceted ways. The most important of these, of course, has been the growing economic relationship between the two countries. And trade and investment have gone together. We've seen that after we signed the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement, we've had a number of other agreements. The ECTA, which is the India-Australia Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement, has been the most significant one in the trade and investment field. And that happened in 2022. If you look at the figures of 2023, when trade and investments were at a peak, we had Australian dollars 49 billion of trade between India and Australia. Wow. And we had investments of around 19 billion from Australia into India and another 35 billion from India into Australia. But along with these have been the huge amount of strides we've made in terms of defense, education, and the fact that we are complementary economies means that there are a number of sectors that have opened up to cooperation with each other. And if you talk about education, because that is the topic for today, we find that there is similarly a lot of needs and demands on both sides which can be met by interacting with each other. Deakin University, of course, has been a pioneer and has opened a campus in India in that regard. But there are others who also made sure that this relationship is carried forward and to the good of both countries and their societies and the needs of each other. In defense, we have an interoperability agreement again, plus collaboration which is taking place in the area of research and innovation. And science and technology, research and innovation, our economic and investment ties, they're all propelling this relationship further. It's based on innovation, it's based on new areas of cooperation, and education plays a very important role.
I think you've really put that well, on how important it is for both the countries to come together. If I could come to you, Dr. Kennedy, from your perspective, Professor Wadhwa has already explained us the numbers. But if I can ask you what geopolitical as well as economic factors are accelerating the India-Australia the convergence, if I can ask you about the strategic convergence, especially in education, skilling, as well as research, because all three are equally important.
And Ambassador Wadwa's already spoken about how important the economic relationship's been, how that's come together really closely over the last few years in particular. And certainly the relationship between India and Australia has always been a warm, friendly one. But in recent years, we've seen that there's a real recognition of the alignment of our values and interests in the region, that there's complementarity in the things that we offer. So what India offers is what Australia needs and vice versa, and that's been really helpful to our engagement. But also in the really strong diaspora links. So Australia's largest growing and fastest growing diaspora group is the Indian diaspora. And this has built a human bridge between our nations that's really facilitated a real interest in the ways that India and Australia can work together. In education in particular, there's a real alignment of stars. You've seen over the last few years, while Australia has been really engaged in an economic relationship with India, at the same time, the national education policy has opened up here and opened up opportunities for us to engage really authentically in ways that are meaningful. The new roadmap for Australia-India engagement is one that maintains education at the centre and sees that education is a really important part of our relationship. It's facilitated by the kinds of partnerships that have developed over time between India's fabulous institutions and Australia's fabulous education system. And it's one that's enabled in this moment by a consolidation of regulatory environment, along with some of the provisions in the Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement that mean that Australia and India are really tightly linked in education, particularly through mutual recognition of qualifications, for example.
And I really love the term what you used, human bridge. That really makes you think that how important that bridge is and keep this relationship going. Absolutely. Professor Martin, if I can ask you, like Deakin, we've spoken about it earlier, Deakin University has been a long-standing partner when it comes to India. And I want to ask you about the Gift City campus. It is a key milestone. How is Deakin reimagining the global education to align with bilateral priorities? And specifically, if I can ask you about NEP 2020, which Dr. Kennedy has also spoken about.
So if we start with NEP, we couldn't be doing what we're doing in India now without the enablement that NEP gave us. When the opportunity to launch the campus in Gift City came up, we seized it and implemented in a very short period of time. And again, I think that speed of response is testament to the changes that India is bringing about in its systems and processes, again, would not have been possible without that enablement. Gift City is part of our education mission in India, but it's not the only part. But I'd like to build on a couple of the words. The future of both of our nations relies on new technologies, the innovation to put those new technologies into the community, but probably above all else, the skills of people to develop the technologies, innovate the technologies, and use the technologies. And that's where I think the university world, the business world, and the government world come together to actually start to shape this for the future of both of our nations. Our nations are complementary. We have many shared problems around water management, around biosecurity, around food security. We are very different. We have very different geographies, very different populations. And that complementarity, I think, brings great strength to our 30-year relationship. And certainly for us, GIFT is one part of that 30-year relationship, but the ability to be the first, to put a bricks and mortar campus there and actually start to bring our students alongside industry, enabled by government. I think you asked me what the future is. The future is very much those three pillars coming together to weave that future, to create the skilled workforce that will underpin the economic and social well-being of both of our nations.
Absolutely, that's really well put. But we have, Professor Wadwa, we've spoken about the NEP, but if I can specifically ask you about NEP 2020, moving a little beyond that, the strategic role that academia plays in equipping, we've been talking about, future, right? So in equipping future-ready workforce that meets the evolving demands of both India as well as Australia industries. And if you could also keep innovation in that in mind.
Yes. So I think that's a very interesting question. You see, you have a new demands coming up from the societies in both countries, especially in India as it moves from, it's a transition from, one of the transitions that I would particularly like to pick on is the e-transition. For example, moving into reliance on critical minerals and new materials, new and renewable energy, for instance. Now, in all these, you require in a ready workforce for the industry, and that has thrown up new demands for the society. So Australia has got an experience. Its universities are well equipped to tailor their courses to make sure that there is a industry-ready workforce in all the new areas that India is now coming up with.
Yeah.
This is only going to grow in future. We've seen a trend now of students willing to branch off into new fields.
Yeah.
There is also a demand in the society for things like, even for things like arts and music and museology, for instance, which have all come up in the past decade or so.
Yes.
We have students who are demanding new areas where they could venture into because they feel that there will be new opportunities for them in the new fields. It's no longer a stereotype. And that's where Australia steps in with the venture that Deakin, for example, has in Gift City. They've chosen very carefully the courses that the society is in need of. Now, coming to industry, because industry has also got particular demands now with this new age economy. So they would be very willing, I think, in the new circumstances to work with academia. But academia is the one which has to take the lead. The government has to be supportive. And if the government is supportive, then everything would fall into place. We also need a lot of collaboration at the governmental level for mutual recognition of degrees, for instance. And for that, the governments have put into place some very effective mechanisms, like mutual recognition of degrees. And also making sure that the skilling part of it is not ignored. Because along with a degree, along with an education, you also require employability, especially in a country which is a huge populated country like India. There is always a demand, and it's only going to grow for making sure that those degrees earn employment. And for that, the model of cheaper education and much more to be educated, more people to be educated, that needs to be followed. I think Australia is quite equipped to do that. It's understood what the needs are of this country, and they've been doing it for some time now.
And picking up those needs, and I think what you very, very rightly said is, the government support, they play a very, very critical role when it comes to that. Even something as important, or, it could be basic, but the recognition of degrees is, again, very critical when it comes to jobs. Professor Martin, if I can ask you, because Professor Wadhwa did talk about the future-ready workforce, and we've been talking about what Deakin University has been doing in the last 30 years. If you can tell us a little bit about the vocational education and training, the VET and the work integrated learning.
So, if you talk to employers or students or their families, they want a really strong education, but alongside that, they want to make sure that they leave university with the other set of core skills that enables you to take the knowledge you've gained from education and put it into practice in wherever you go with your career. So for Deakin, it's really important that we run those two strands in parallel and we embed the ability to get those work-ready skills, the ability to work in teams, to communicate well, to work across global boundaries, because much of the innovation we're talking about now is transnational. It relies on working across those. That's absolutely critical. But the universities alone can't provide what both of our nations need. We need that skilled workforce who can make the factories, the productions, the clean energy producers, work on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's where pairing great university education with strengthening VET, vocational training, will be really important. And I think, again, complementarity for our two countries. Australia brings a long tradition in very high-quality VET education. India has the scale of population and the skills needs. And I think if we can look how we take Australia's strengths, but find ways of economically scaling that, I think it is a win-win for both countries. So it's not university or skills, it's university and skills will underpin the nation, both of our nation's future prosperity.
Yeah, using it correctly. On that very note, we're going to be taking a really short break. When we come back, this important and interesting conversation will continue.
If it matters to you, if it matters to you, if it matters to you, it matters to India, it matters to India, it matters to India, and it matters to me, and it matters to me.
India Matters with Shivaru, only on NDTV 24/7.
These are the visuals that are coming in. Let's go full frame with it.
For every big news story,
you can't defend the indefensible Ruchira Kamboj, but that's what Pakistan has been doing for a very, very long time.
We're sifting through a lot of information. Some is right, some is not right. But I think we are
India tunes in to NDTV.
In fact, on NDTV, like we've been doing for the last few hours, we've been
for fast, clear, and credible news.
We've also been, busting a lot of misinformation that's been coming in.
When I was standing on the road, I saw these lights going off in the sky, and I could hear
where credibility
sounds of like
comes
what sound
first.
like blasts happening.
When Pakistan started shelling and first shell landed here, you can see this.
Well, we have reached at ground zero, and this village is
NDTV. First, fast, factual.
Why was there a hurry? Was it the government that was in a hurry?
I don't want to blame anyone.
Joining us today here in the NDTV newsroom.
Government cannot walk away from this responsibility.
Cricket is region of sort in this country.
Would you like to comment on what happened?
What is the condition of the injured at this point? How many people died?
What exactly happened? You have lost your daughter.
The markets move fast.
And so should your portfolio. Expert insights, real-time stock picks.
Do I buy Ola?
Should I hold ICICI?
Welcome back. So, in this interesting conversation, Dr. Kennedy, I want to ask you, we were talking about how both the countries can actually learn, pick up, and, work together to make it better for both. If I can ask you the role again, just taking from what Professor Martin had said when it comes to skilling as, and training.
So,
VET actually, vocational.
Yeah, before the break, Professor Martin was talking about how we talk about higher education and vocational education separately, but actually what we need, what India needs and what Australia needs is the integration of skills and higher education, and sometimes the development of skills for specific tasks, specific work in Indian industry is absolutely the focus. And I think sometimes when we think about Australian education, we're really focused on university education. But the reason that Australia has such a high concentration of world-leading universities is because we have a brilliant education system. It's a very high-quality education system underpinned by great frameworks, a really strong regulatory system, and it's enabled us to have great universities, but also have great skills provision as well. We work in skills and in an environment where we're very focused on industry-led skills establishment, and then that's based on competency-based education, which means we look at what somebody needs to be able to do at the end of their education rather than what they need to be able to know, although it'll incorporate what they know. And Australia's system for securing quality in this type of education is absolutely world leading. So we see a real opportunity, as Professor Martin mentions, to establish in India Australian capability to assist, or not assist, but work with India in order to be able to meet the incredible ambitions that India has for skilling.
If I can just ask you, Professor Kennedy, the big opportunities, what are they when it comes to advancing innovation diplomacy, specifically if I can ask you, sustainability, energy, as well as inclusive education, because that's again 3 very critical components.
Yeah, so I think if we talk again about the national education policy, it's all about expansion, inclusion and quality, isn't it? And these are areas that Australia is very, very focused in. And particularly, I think there's alignment again between Australia and India in our green energy ambitions. India's ambition for renewable energy is absolutely extraordinary, and Australia's capability, particularly in solar power, but also in our opportunity to be able to partner for knowledge exchange right across the green economy suite is really important. And the Australian Trade and Investment Commission, where I work, it's absolutely what we're focused on, ways in which we can engage fruitfully in a bilateral arrangement to support each nation's green energy ambitions. So I'd say that there's lots of opportunity for skills in that area, of course, but we're also seeing really strong opportunity and willingness to engage in things like AI and cybersecurity, these areas where India has had such strength over such an enduring period of time, absolutely world leading in these areas, where we see that Australia can learn from India and that India and Australia will have fabulous and enduring relationships.
Great. So Professor Ambassador Vada, if I can ask you here, how can education and research, how can that be further elevated as central pillars? We've spoken about innovation, but if I can ask you specifically about education, research, when it comes to advancing shared goals such as sustainability, technology, exchange, and most importantly, capacity building?
I think I'll start with capacity building. So that's, as you yourself said, very important here, because as far as India is concerned, there is a certain amount of need which has arisen in today's circumstances. And taking it from there, one has to then make sure that the academia is ready to impart that kind of skills and get the workforce ready for that future. Because of the needs of this huge population, we require a model which is not just imparting education in the classroom, but also making sure that there is an opportunity to practice it. So therefore, there is a whole of government, industry, academia approach which needs to be followed as much as possible. It's not been possible in the past to do this in India, but now we see that a lot of industry is actually interested in that, because they know that otherwise they will have to undertake that burden like the IT industry did over the past decade or so. And after 2000, we saw that most of the IT companies trained a number of engineers into new skills at their own cost. But if the academia can do that from the beginning itself and have a focus on those kind of areas, then it's much better for the industry, and they can absorb that workforce also much more easily. I come back to my point about making sure that this kind of education, which is a combination of academic skills and also practical skills, that should be done on a cost-effective basis.
Last question, I know we're running short of time, but because the ambassador's spoken about cost, also I want to ask you, so there are going to be 2 questions. One is about the scholarship which you have. You've been with Deakin University for 6 years. You'll have a Vice Chancellor scholarship. If you can briefly tell us about that, and also looking ahead, how do you think emerging platforms like the GIFT City campus reflect on the future of global education, and how can they prepare when we talk about the students, how can they be impactful contributors to India-Australia knowledge economy? So 2 parts.
So the cost, clearly the investment that a student and their family makes in education is significant, and we recognise that cost. One of the things that Deakin takes great pride in is the amount we give back through the scholarship program. Over 30 years, it's been more than 50 million Australian dollars. My maths isn't good enough quickly to translate that into rupees, but it's a good number of crore rupee invested back. And part of that is the Vice Chancellor's scholarships, where we recognise outstanding, young, talented, gifted students who perhaps haven't got the ability to pay themselves. And we have a range ranging from 100% scholarships for the very, very best. And these are quite extraordinary students I love engaging with. So we recognise that. But also we're looking at addressing costs through different models. GIFT is one of those ways. The 2+2 hub arrangements that we have with a number of leading universities, it's not cheap, but it's significantly less of an investment that you'd have to make to spend 4 years in Australia. So we're always looking at ways that we can use Deakin's educational excellence, but combine it with new approaches, innovative ideas and technology to reduce the cost.
Okay, I think that's very well said. But thank you all so much. It's really been a pleasure to have all three of you with us in our studio. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Thank you.